Hello, scale modelers, and anybody who happens to be building the Eaglemoss Delorean. Alrighty, well, I got a little first look, first glimpse at the suspension mod that I've been working on here. So far, I'm still in the building phase, and nothing is really secured down in place here. I am using the scale hardware. Right now these are just slid into place, so that way this stays in for the moment. And eventually the top part of this piston for the front shock will eventually have a washer up over the top of this, and possibly also might make like a little rubber grommet for it, kind of like a real shock and strut have there. But so far, because that washer will actually help keep this in place, so that way it doesn't move up or down. But it just goes right into this center shaft right here. So I mean, if you were to push it up, I mean, it won't really move up at all. But the whole thing here is that this is going to be secured in place, so that way it doesn't move, period. And like I said, those are loose. They have had a tendency to try to fall out. But this will eventually look and work just like a real shock will. And if you notice how much travel this has so far. Right now, I don't remember if this spring, I don't remember if the spring that I got as a replacement is the 17-pound or the 11-pound spring that I had gotten. But obviously more travel than the spring that came with it. But this is the rear spring. The rear springs that actually came with it were you could actually squeeze a heck of a lot easier than the front springs that came with the subscription. But that has a lot more travel on it right now, which I am definitely happy to say. Yes, some of the paint has scuffed off, and I did take a file down to these side parts right here just to see if it would actually give it more travel. It honestly doesn't really make a difference, but I don't know. Well, I mean, because there was a little notch in there, so it was only causing it to have like a certain distance of travel before knocking into this part of the framing. So that's why I filed that part down. And as you can see, it's actually working pretty good so far. And doing this kind of ends up pulling on the suspension a little bit. Well, eventually I'm probably going to end up using the bolts in the top and the bottom too, and maybe use a little piece of the rubber in between there, so that way it gives it a little bit more play. That way it's not, you know, paint rubbing on paint. And I actually have the screws a bit loose, so that way, well, maybe not that one right now, but I have the screws a bit loose, so that way it wasn't touching. But it just seemed that the more you'd move it, the more the screws would end up popping out. But yeah, this is what I've been working on, and I mean, I personally, I don't mind people who actually prefer and like the flying portion of this, but something I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm probably going to take the magnets out, seeing as one came loose from the passenger side of the vehicle. And I'm just going to pop those out, pop that magnet out there. I'm probably going to take one of the bolts, put it straight through, put the nut on the end, so that way that can't come down. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But yep, this is the one thing, and well, so far it's just this one one piece right here. So far it's just the one shock. But yeah, I mean, it's taken me, geez, I mean, I started working on this at least back around December time, but seeing as I was waiting on quite a bit of stuff in the mail, like all the little taps and dies and whatnot, yeah, that's what's taken me so long, because I mean, I needed to tap and die to actually get this done properly. So that's what it is, and all this will end up being repainted. I gotta try to figure out a way for this to try and sit a little bit flatter. I might try and see if I can do something about closing that gap right in there, just so that way it's literally just fixed at the bottom there. I don't know. I might end up using some JB Weld in there, just to close that up, paint back over it, and you can see. Oh, if you're wondering about how I made the shock right here, it's I used the original piece down at the bottom. I had cut the piston down that this came with, and I tapped some threading onto it, and I took some hollow tubing. I believe it's 5mm hollow tubing, and yep, see, one of the little nuts ended up coming off. But where did it come off from? Oh, right here, right up at the side. Let me just see if I can get this back on here. Yeah, like I said, these nuts aren't fixed permanently into place yet, because I need to be able to remove stuff so I can, you know, change stuff around. But 5mm tubing, I put some threading in there, and trust me, it was not easy to try to get threading on the inside of that tubing. I do have a 4mm tap for that. It's a M4 by .70 tap for the inside of that. And then I have a 2mm tap in this piece of tubing right here, which I think this might have been like 3 or 3.5mm hollow tubing, which I ended up getting the tubing itself from my local hobby store, and that was quite some time ago, because a lot of the actual products that I needed, like the springs and the tubing and stuff like that, I I had gotten like way back in like September or October. Don't mind me, it just takes a little bit of trying to straighten that pipe out right there to get the top portion in. But yeah, so I mean, I had pretty much everything on hand, and eventually, when everything is all the nuts are permanently fixed in place, I am pretty much going to end up using what you'd use on real automotive nuts and bolts, and I got some blue lock, blue thread lock. I have some blue thread lock, so these nuts, after I tighten them down, they will not come loose. Especially seeing as, you know, eventually this is going to be sitting on the shelf, but even just it's sitting there, they could potentially end up, you know, coming loose themselves over time, just if you happen to pick it up and move it, and any of the pressure in the suspension will loosen it, just like with the screws. So, and yeah, I thought that was one of the bolts I have holding the top portion of this in. But no, it was the center pipe. So, I mean, yeah, that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been working on for the last couple of months. And, I mean, right now, I mean, this has good tension. Because of the spring itself, it goes up and it comes back down. It goes up and it comes back down. I did end up getting a small bag from the company that I had gotten some of the taps from. That's micromark.com. And small bag springs, different sizes and lengths, and, you know, strengths and whatnot. Because I was wondering if I was going to end up needing to put like a small little like pen size spring down the center of the shaft to see if it would actually help with all the movement and everything. But it is working awesome. There's enough tension for it to go up and down, and eventually I will figure out if what the issue is with it not wanting to go back. So, could just be that the screw down here is a little bit too tight, but there we go. That is the first look on this particular Delorean mod. See, now I like this this kind of a shock, like an actual shock, better than the factory one, because I mean, you could tell how much movement this thing had, because it came up like maybe right there from the top, like maybe like a 5mm travel is all it was able to do. This is a heck of a lot more than that. Because right now, I think I have at least maybe 10 mils of travel here. Because that's where the bottom portion of the spring ends, and then you can see, well, maybe you can't see, but right there is the bottom, and right there is at the top, and that bottom portion of that shock goes all the way to the top. So there's at least 10 mil of travel compared to the 5 mil from factory. So when you actually go to push down on it, it's going to act like an actual suspension. It's going to pop itself back up. This hopefully should fix any braking on the suspension. Also, to help with it, you could also get a lower PSI rated spring, even lower than what I have right here. Potentially, it all depends. It all depends. Once I get these on the car, before any of the other parts go on, and that would be front and rear. I'm gonna push down on the underside of the frame, or the underside of the car, on front and back, and see how this ends up working out. See if I need to get a lower PSI rated spring for these. So there's probably going to be multiple updates for this as I keep getting more work done. Just figured I'd let you guys know. First of my mods coming together. Hopefully by the time I do the next update video, this will look a little bit cleaner down in here. I just wanted to see if like the piece of rubber under here would kind of straighten this out, but I might need to put like a little cup in there, like a regular shock would have for the spring. So we'll find out. So be on the lookout for the next update on the Delorean mods that I'm doing from Eaglemoss, and hope you can work something out like this too, and I will keep you guys posted. So until then, thanks for watching Brian's Builds, and we out of time.